Hello, and welcome to Joe and Kat Chats. Today we're talking about identity and expression with Jamie Lavery. You can find them at itsme_j.d on Instagram. And this is recorded live on June 23rd on Facebook and YouTube at /JoeNiceDJ. You can also find us on all socials at Joe and Kat Chats, or on our personal pages at JoeNiceDJ and at CatWells22. We are also happy to be a part of Tastemakers Radio on Dash Radio, which is every Wednesday. You can listen to us at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So I'm super excited to get into the topic today. I just first want to welcome my good friend, Jamie. And if you don't mind, I would just ask you to, I guess, just introduce yourself and let us know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. Really good friends with Kat, long time. My name is Jamie. My pronoun, I don't like using pronouns, but when they're necessary, my pronouns are they, them. Anything else?
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. I will say that I added, if you're watching the video part, I added my pronouns for today because we are, we've been talking about Pride and we've been talking about LGBTQ plus community issues the last couple of weeks. And so my pronouns are she, her. I identify as a bi person. And so, so we'll get into it. And yeah, I guess, Joe, do you want to just let us know how are you?
You know what? I'm cool as a fan. Another day in paradise, another opportunity to raise the horizon of aspiration and deepen the well of inspiration with another edition of Joe and Kat Chats. Plain and simple. It's simple and plain. It is what it is. How are you?
Amazing. Yeah, I'm doing well. It's another day. I'm wearing a sparkly jumpsuit. So, what can go wrong when you're wearing a sparkly jumpsuit?
You know what, Kat? I want to make sure that everybody that's watching and everybody that is listening understands this. You didn't need to put on that sparkly jumpsuit to be shining at all times. You know what I'm talking about.
That's sweet.
You always shine brightly. And I think everybody understands and already knew that.
Yes.
Fair, thank you.
You're very welcome.
And I mean, there's a reason. I know that the topic today seems kind of like a bit abstract because it's called identity and expression. But I think that it's just really fun, and we'll get into it a little bit later. But I just thought today was the perfect day to be sparkly, because we're going to talk about clothing and how we present as people. Jamie, how are you doing? Is there anything on your mind recently?
Oh my God. Of course. There's always so many things on my mind. I can't shut it up.
I mean, that's what this space is for.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to talk specifically about, Pride specific things. So I'm in Toronto. I am a non-binary lesbian. I'm gender fluid, so I'm all over the freaking place. But if we're going to talk about Pride and specifically why we still need Pride, about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, there was a gay bashing on Hanlon's Point, which is arguably the only safe queer space that is open, or was open at the time, because we were still very much in lockdown. And I think that shook the whole community, because Toronto was very much seen as a very safe space for queer people. I mean, we definitely have had some, things happen over the last 5 years. But yeah, I think that the attack at Hanlon's Point a couple weeks ago really shook some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that. It's like you said, Hanlon's Point is kind of one of the main or only sort of queer, safe outdoor spaces, because the rest of, many of the safe spaces are, public places in the village that have to be closed during quarantine. So yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to the victim of that. And I know I read something earlier today just saying that they are not feeling safe, even though the perpetrator has been arrested. So, I mean, it will be a long time before they can, feel safe again. And it's tragic. And of course, the implications in the community are vast, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I also wanted to just acknowledge, speaking of Toronto, the disproportionate police response to the houseless folks who were evicted from Trinity Bellwoods Park yesterday. The police presence and the private security presence was, it looked like it wasn't anywhere in North America, but I say that in the sense of, imagery I think I've thought about, before I started talking about police brutality, because when I think about the events of the last year, particularly since, Joe and I started talking about this, it's exactly, the police presence that we expect for, poor people, for anyone who's marginalized, for BIPOC communities. And so, I mean, there's been a lot of shock and awe in some of the online places, but when we really think about it, we shouldn't be shocked that the police presence is so vast and horrendous for people who are marginalized, such as the houseless community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was not shocking. Shocking is not the word I want, because it's not a shock at all that that's what happened. It's been leading up to it for about a year at this point. We all knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when and how bad it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I think I saw something on Instagram earlier today where someone kind of did an estimate of what the cost was of mobilizing the police and the private security, and it was about 147,000 Canadian dollars to do those evictions.
You know where that money could have gone?
Housing them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Housing.
Public programs? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Which is what we've been calling for, as activists for a long time. Yeah. Now, Joe, I know you mentioned something to me earlier about Hungary. I know we talked about it a couple of weeks ago because they just passed a law, or they passed legislation that makes sharing content about LGBTQ people and issues in schools prohibited, because they're saying it like promotes homosexuality and gender changes. They've made transition illegal. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, much of what you just said is true. It also the new Hungarian law does not recognize marriage between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. It only recognizes marriage between a woman and a man. Additionally, it makes it an outlawed legal status for anyone that is transgender or in transition, or those who have already made the sex change. So we've spoken in 3 or 4 different episodes, in the global issues episodes, about Hungary's president, a gentleman by the name of Viktor Orban. He is as right-wing can possibly be. He is on the spectrum that we discussed in the voting episode of Joe and Kat Chats. We discussed the Overton window. Viktor Orban is to the right of Donald Trump. Just to give you an idea of how truly authoritarian he actually is. So
something like Netanyahu, maybe.
That's entirely possible. That's entirely possible. But today in the Euros 2020 football tournament, and I do like a little bit of football from time to time, and I've been known to have some exquisite footwork on the pitch, but that's another discussion for another day.
Nice.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They don't call me Joe Nice for nothing now. I mean, let's let's keep that in proper perspective. But but today it was Germany versus Hungary in Group F, F as in Foxtrot, of the Euros 2020 tournament, and the mayor of Munich wanted to light up the Allianz Arena, and the Allianz Arena is where Bayern Munich is one of the biggest football clubs in the world. That's where they play their football. The governing body for the European Football Association, it's known as UEFA, UEFA, said, nope, you can't do that because we don't like mixing sports with politics. So other cities in the German Football League, known as the Bundesliga, decided to light their stadiums in the rainbow flag. So Werder Bremen, Eintracht Frankfurt, FC Cologne, VfW Wolfsburg, FC Augsburg, and the two teams in Berlin, which would be, Hertha Berlin, and for the life of me, I can't name their other team in Berlin, but there's several teams in the Bundesliga that decided to light up their stadiums in rainbow colors. In contrast, or really in opposition, Hungary decided to light up their stadiums using the Hungarian flag, which is red, white, and green. Now, earlier today, UEFA issued a statement and they put out a rainbow flag with their logo on Twitter. So again, we talked about this about a week or two ago, where we talked about rainbow washing. We discussed this, how it's not that much different than woke washing, what we saw last summer with a whole bunch of people putting black squares on Instagram and say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but then not doing shit to actually benefit Black people, Indigenous people, or people of color. So we're seeing this more and more again. We're seeing the rise of right-wing authoritarianism in Europe. And this vote for this draconian law, this draconian anti-LGBTQ law in Hungary was passed by a 157-1 margin. It was damn near unanimous. Now, again, I have been a major proponent of workers' strikes. I was incredibly critical and disappointed when the NBA last year in the bubble, when they decided to go on strike, a wildcat strike, when Jacob Blake was shot in Minneapolis 7 times in the back by a white police officer. And the NBA said, we're shutting it down, we're not playing. What I would have loved to have seen happen today is any team not part of the Hungary national team not take the field. I would have loved to have seen that happen. Because if UEFA is going to say, we're not going to mix sports and politics, we're not going to do that. But then UEFA was allowing people to take knees during other football tournaments. That's mixing sports and politics. So which is it? You can't have it both ways. Look, not every footballing organization or every other organization has its integrity like you and I, because you and I are straight down the middle. We're consistent folk. So if UEFA wants to go ahead and let players take knees in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement around the United States and across Canada and other countries, then why all of a sudden would UEFA say that they're not interested in mixing sports with politics? Which is it? I want answers. And additionally, FIFA, which is the governing body for football around the world, they decided to basically have a hands-off, laissez-faire approach with respect to this entire issue. So German football teams went ahead, lit up their stadiums with rainbow flags. The stadium in question where the game was taking place was not allowed to by UEFA. Now the European Union wants to go ahead and issue some sort of sanctions against Hungary. And this is something that you and I spoke about last week and the week before, Kat, with respect to Israel and Palestine and the indigenous children that were found in unmarked graves, and the people from Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the Greenwood section that were found. There were found some more bodies of people that were descendants of people who were killed in the Black Wall Street massacre. If in fact the European Union is what it says it is, a union of countries across Europe, where they're supposedly borderless, and in some cases share the same currency, otherwise known as the euro. Then if one country chooses to not adopt the ideals that make up Europe and make up a continent of tolerant people, or at least tries to make up a continent of tolerant people, then the other member states should sanction or realistically boycott, divest, and sanction Hungary, which is why I would have been so proud if the German national football team had not taken the pitch today. And then in solidarity, the other teams in Group F, France and Portugal, would have not taken the field today. Because I guarantee you, if France and Portugal, and the French national team is loaded with a lot of football stars, loaded. And the biggest name in world football plays for Portugal, and that's Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo earlier this week removed 2 Coke bottles away from an interview, and Coke's value dropped by $4.5 billion. Simply by moving 2 Coke bottles away from his view in the camera shot.
I mean, I'm not sorry about that.
I'm not sorry about that either. But I say that to illustrate a bigger point. Imagine if Cristiano Ronaldo made a statement tonight and said, in solidarity with our LGBTQ community, Portugal and the rest of our team is not taking the field. We have discussed this with Didier Deschamps, the head coach of the French national team, and he is in complete agreement with us. We are not taking the field. We are taking a stand against the anti-LGBTQ law in Hungary, and we want to make sure changes get made across not only Hungary, but across the rest of Europe. It's that sort of, when I talk about worker strikes, it's that sort of intra-industry and inter-industry intersectionality that must take place. This has to be bigger than just legislation from a particular government or mandates or rules or rulemaking, etc. This has to come from the people.
Yeah, and something that I sort of was thinking about, and I've said it before, is like, the personal is political. I'm of the feminist camp that, follows that ideology. Like, the personal is political. You cannot have a logo with the pride flag and rainbow wash your corporate existence without, acknowledging the political roots of pride and the political, gesture that is. So, Jamie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, not specifically about football, but rainbow washing and the roots of pride. So, interestingly, Toronto Pride is sponsored by Bud Light. And Bud Light's parent company, I cannot for the life of me remember the name of it, has donated tens of thousands of dollars to political candidates that oppose LGBTQ plus rights. The interesting part is the Stonewall Inn has now boycotted all products from that parent company, Budweiser, Bud White, Stella Artois, etc. And they are pouring those products down their drain in protest of that company. So, more rainbow washing, more we stand with you, but behind closed doors, we're going to support the people that want to tear you down.
Yeah, it's horrendous. And I mean, this sort of is a conversation that goes into the type of conversation we're going to have today, because I just kind of wrote a little blurb because I was having trouble, I guess, trying to express myself or figuring out how to express myself, and the reasons why I think how we present and how we express our identities is totally political. So I'm just going to read that and then we can get into a discussion. So today's topic is called Identity and Expression. How we present ourselves is grounded in deep social and cultural ideologies, assumptions, and values. The gender binary, which is man, woman, has been not only socially and culturally upheld, but also politically criminalized through laws and policing of people who do not conform to it. This means that when someone presents with anything that is interpreted as outside of these norms, where values are embedded, it is thrust into a political landscape just by a simple aesthetic choice, makeup, clothing, etc. So when members of the LGBTQ plus community use clothing to signal identity markers or embody their identities, it can be used as cause for harm. This is why I think this topic is so important to discuss, but I also want to keep it, light in the sense because clothing and dress and performance of gender is, and our personalities involved with that, through clothing and makeup is fun and fabulous and comforting, but it also has violent implications that underlie our conversation today. So with that said, I want to kind of get into a discussion about identity and what identities we use and how we came to those identities. So I guess I'll ask our wonderful guest. So Jamie, did you want to talk a little bit about, your identity, the fluidity of it? How do you came to identify as you do?
How much time do we have?
I know it's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, so I've always been queer. That's just facts. But for a long, long time, I was afraid of my queer identity, both my gender and my sexuality. And so I have recently been getting rid of what I call my straight clothes, quote unquote, because those were the clothes that I wore, trying to pass as straight and cis so that I wouldn't get attention thrown on me. Few years ago, some catalysts happened that I won't discuss, that made me realize that maybe I'm not so straight as I thought that I was. I originally came out as pansexual because I was in a relationship with a man at the time, and I figured that was a nice, easy, inclusive way for me to, start my transition towards being a lesbian. And then I don't know, closer to the start of COVID, when everyone was locked down and we all kind of had that opportunity to sit and pause and reflect, that was where my gender identity really started coming out. And I started understanding, like, maybe I'm not a woman. I was assigned female at birth. So maybe I'm not that, but I'm not a trans man either, and I'm not this, and I don't know, so I think probably a lot of people do this, but I kind of started off doing like stupid online quizzes, like, what is it, like, am I non-binary, am I this, am I a lesbian, am I gay, like, whatever, doing all those little quizzes that I think that a lot of queer people do. And our friend Eve said it best. I kind of brought it up to her. I was like, I think I might be non-binary, but like I'm not sure. And I've been doing these quizzes, and she's like, okay, if you're asking me what it feels like to be non-binary, you're doing the quizzes and you're having the conversations talking about how you think you might be non-binary, honey, you're non-binary. Like, if you're putting this much thought into your gender, you're what you think that you are. And then my identity as a lesbian, that took a little longer. I was probably out of my relationship with no, I think I only came out as a lesbian like 4 weeks ago, actually.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That's always a nice feeling to, have a new identifier and feel good about it.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And this, I think, kind of gets into our clothing aesthetic conversation is maybe like a week and a half after coming out as a lesbian, I completely changed the way that I dressed. Like, night and day. All of a sudden, I was not worried about wearing colors or, flannel. Or, those other like very stereotypically lesbian clothing identifiers. And I put them on my body and I was like, wow, no, this feels right. This feels good. Why haven't I been doing this for so long? And it's because of that stigma and the threat of violence that you were talking about. I specifically went and bought a man's button-up short sleeve collared shirt that is like a light cream with toucan birds all over it. And it's my new favorite shirt. I love it so much. And I wore it last Friday. And I went for a walk around the village, and I was feeling myself. I felt so good. I felt so confident, so whatever. And then I went to meet up with my friend Clay, and I had to go down out of the village. The further I got from the village, the more self-conscious and uncomfortable I felt in the clothing that I was wearing.
Mm.
And then I got back to the village, and the confidence just came right back. So yeah, like the leers from, you know, cis straight white men that you get when you walk down the street wearing certain clothes made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's really quite profound, because I think that, you know, how we present ourselves in the clothing we wear, you know, whether we choose to wear makeup or not, is, you know, it is, you know, what am I trying to say? Like putting a visual marker on yourself in a different way than, you know, race would have, because like that's an, like, I hate to say it like this, but like that's the black and white thing. Or, you know, like we experience the world in a certain way, and I think as a white person, it's like it's hard to understand, you know, not that we can't empathize, but, you know, a racialized experience or marginalized experience until, you know, you can kind of see a little bit of that. Do you have anything to add to that, Joe?
Yeah, I have a question, and I just wrote this down. Jamie, do you
Yes.
feel that the clothes you wear are your armor?
I think that they definitely were before I came out.
Mm-hmm.
They were what I hid behind, right? So I would wear only neutrals, mostly all black. Very often clothes that hid the shape of my body. I very much used that as a way to blend into the crowd and not be noticed, because I was worried that if I got noticed, that someone would clock me. And that was a very scary thing before I was out. Then I came out, and, you know, everyone was like, yeah, we know.
Right.
But yeah, I think now I don't use clothing so much as an armor, more as like a, what are the words I want? An enhancement of my personality.
Mm.
Got you. So your clothes aren't your clothes, I guess, to use a food analogy, are salt and pepper. You can't just the clothes by themselves are just by themselves, but but you know, just like salt and pepper, you just can't eat salt and pepper for dinner. It's like, hey, I'm having salt for dinner. No, it doesn't work that way. But
Yeah.
salt and pepper with something else makes everything else better. And I guess the clothes for in this respect for you are that. It makes you, I guess, a more enhanced, a more confident Jamie, a more self-assured Jamie, depending on not only the clothes that you wear, but the environments in which you wear them.
Yes, 100%. And oddly, on the flip side of that, when I dress like more like neutral or like slightly on the masculine side and I'm in the village, I feel very validated as a lesbian and as a non-binary person. But because I'm very fluid, sometimes I feel very feminine, and I like wearing feminine clothes, and I like the makeup and all that kind of stuff. And when I go out in the village wearing very feminine clothing and makeup, I feel, and I have also had comments of people say, like, you know, white cis gay men being like, ugh, there's so many straight girls here. And I'm like, I'm neither, but you go ahead and have that view. So, you know, depending on the environment that you're in, different clothing has different implications.
That makes total sense. I mean, take a look at, you know, in a slightly different context, take a look at Los Angeles with gang warfare, Bloods and Crips, blue and red. I mean, if you wore the wrong color in the wrong neighborhood, that could have fatal consequences for you. And it's it's not entirely dissimilar with you and your clothing.
Mhm.
We're not too far away removed from 5 years ago with that nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida,
Yeah.
where again it was at a gay bar, if I'm not mistaken, and there was
Pulse nightclub.
somebody. Pulse nightclub. That's exactly what it was. Yes, and somebody went ahead and said, "Hey, I don't like gay people," and started shooting. And I would guarantee you that there were people in that Pulse nightclub that were not wearing clothes that you would typically assign to a particular gender.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of queerness is gender nonconformity, whether you identify as cisgender or not. Um, I mean, there's plenty of cis gay men out there that dress very feminine, and there's a lot of cis lesbian women that dress very masculine. So I think just being queer in general is gender non confirmation in and of itself.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, there's something that you mentioned something that I experienced as well. And before I get into that, I just want to say I feel gross about my comparison of the two marginalized sort of identities or existence, because that empathy is aside, like that was a gross comparison, so my apologies. But I think in sort of the queer community, as a bisexual and cisgendered woman, like that has bi erasure embedded in it, and so there's like this, I guess, imposter syndrome attached to it, because there are people within the queer community that don't think that bi is a real identity. They think that you have to pick, gay or lesbian, or in the broader society, that's also an assumption, and it's just sort of this. It's a word that's wrought with like political and historical erasure. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting thing having to. I present as femme, and I wear lipstick, and I wear bright colors, but I also wear flannel and Birkenstocks. So, like, like it's an interesting thing. But
Yeah.
I remain cis, and so, yeah, I just really like the fluidity of the freedom of having fluidity with gender and sexuality.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we all have a distinct style. I know Joe and I are t-shirt people. It looks like you're wearing a t-shirt under your flannel today. Joe actually has a new t-shirt line that he's released recently at joenicedj.net, I think.
That's absolutely correct, Maxwell's correct.
Yeah, do you want to just talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's relevant here in the sense that all of the t-shirts have a message.
Yeah, it's as I've said before, it's clothing with a conscience, merch with a message. And what I wanted to do with this clothing line was to make sure that it's not only ethically and sustainably made, but there is a social and or political message behind it. Well, not even really behind it, in front, because it's on your t-shirt, so you're going to see it. And I gave a speech last year at the People's Power Assembly in Baltimore, and I said these 4 words: humanity, freedom, equality, and survival. And it's been ever present in a lot of the discourse that you and I have had over the past 55 weeks. It's been a part of many of the other podcasts and YouTube shows that I've been a part of, and it's been a part of the Joe and the live and direct chats that I've been doing and other social endeavors that I've been involved with. And I decided to make those 4 words that I've called the 4 fights, because we're all fighting for humanity, freedom, equality, and survival, as kind of the cornerstone shirt of the clothing line. And decided to have that in 6 languages, which are called the United Nations languages, because they're the most 6 commonly spoken languages around the world. So Mandarin, Chinese, Arabic, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. And we're maybe looking to expand to a couple of other languages. I mean, I know some people who speak Hebrew, so that could potentially be a language. German might be another one. So we're looking to diversify in the forthcoming weeks. But something that I've been in some rather, I don't want to use the word iconic because that might seem a bit hyperbolic, but there have been some pictures that I've been in that people are like, wow, that's a really great picture. And the message in those pictures, because we all know that old adage, pictures is worth 1,000 words. So when you see the picture that my friend Ben, you can look him up on Instagram at Crown and Flint Photo, there's 2 pictures that he took of me. One was me standing with my protest sign in front of City Hall by myself. And it's a close-up, and you can read some of the line items on it, like reparations, ranked choice voting, postal banking, Medicare for all, ending the wars, criminal justice reform. And then you can see another picture of me where it's this massive building of City Hall. And there's little old B in the bottom left. And that one's called Citizen versus the City. And those pictures resonated with people because of the symbolism and the message behind them and the interpretation of those messages has a certain individuality to each person. And and fashion is that same way. Fashion has a certain individuality and a certain interpretation to each individual. So I might like Jamie's red and black lumberjack flannel that she has on, the Biggie Small special, if you will. I might like it. Other people might not. I might like the fact that Kat looks like a bowling ball tonight, shiny, ready to roll 300, no problem, right?
Meet you at the disco.
Meet you at the disco, right? Other people might be like, nah, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. Some people might not like the fact that I'm wearing a plain old white T-shirt. Other people might love it because it looks clean, whatever it is. So the individuality of the interpretation of fashion is it has value, especially when on some of the pictures that I have that are part of the T-shirts on my clothing line, they're left to interpretation. They're left to the beholder and the eye in which you're looking at it. But then there are some messages that are just cold hard facts. For example, the crossword puzzle shirt, where it has all those words and the blank letters in between the words spells reparations. There's no misunderstanding about that. And you don't really need to be the greatest speller or have a PhD in English to understand what that means. When you see and you look at humanity, freedom, equality, and survival, yes, in context, those 4 words have different meanings for different people, but ultimately the general ideology of those 4 words has the same sort of gravity for people who are involved in those 4 fights, whether individually or simultaneously for all 4. So the whole reason why, and let's not forget the Money series, people have been really vibing with the Money series because it's six Federal Reserve notes that people primarily use in the United States, the 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100. But I added the 2 because Thomas Jefferson is among one of the worst people in United States history. And we wanted to make sure we changed the face of the $2 bill also. Because the people that are on those 7 Federal Reserve notes, they're generally not good people. They're really not. Benjamin Franklin might have been the best of all of them, and he had his issues. So, and he's on the 100. So we decided to change that up. Because if America says that, based upon the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and they meant men in those days as people, not necessarily from at least my interpretation of the gender identity as a man, but they meant men as in human beings, but they didn't say that, but they should have. If people are created equal, then you wouldn't have needed the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment because, hey, all men are created equal. You wouldn't need special rules to make sure that you have slaves or not have slaves because you wouldn't have slaves in the first place. So the people that are on our United States currency, if we want to change the way that we as the United States, or at least I, living here in the United States, because you two are in Canada, want to represent the quote unquote best of what the America should be, then I think having halfway decent people or having really good people that fought for something would make a lot of sense on the money. And and this also goes to an even bigger point. And Kat, you know this. I always like, I'm a 3D chess kind of guy. You know what I mean? I like looking at the much bigger picture. I like reading between the lines that are in between the lines. The fact that I went ahead and had to create the money series and had to change the currency to put civil rights heroes on the front of the money, and the fact that I live in a country that has civil rights heroes speaks to how truly fucked up the United States actually is. Because if you have a country in which you actually have civil rights heroes, that means somebody from the disenfranchised group had to represent the disenfranchised group against the establishment that was disenfranchising them in the first place. It would be wonderful to live in a country where there weren't civil rights heroes, because if you don't have civil rights heroes, that means everybody's rights get afforded and everybody gets equal treatment. But seeing as how we don't live in this utopian place that I like to think the United States could potentially be, but deep in my heart, I know it will never be. I'm going to do my part as much as I can to try to raise awareness. And I think a great way of doing that is not only buying a piece of merchandise or several pieces of merchandise of joenicedj.net, but also making sure that you understand the meaning behind the money series, because people should know who John Brown is. People should know who Sojourner Truth is. You should understand what Rosa Parks meant to the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King. You should understand that Frederick Douglass is the greatest Pan-Africanist of all time. You should know that, and people should know that. And people should know that not just during the shortest month of the 12-month calendar year for Black History Month. This is part of American history. This should be understood and known 365 days a year, or in 366 in case of a leap year.
Totally. Yeah. And I do encourage everybody to check out the money series. It's probably my favorite thing that on in the line that Joe has created. So definitely check it out at joenicedj.net. And we'll put it in the show notes too.
We'll put it in the show notes. And real quick, Kat, and you know me, I I'm a language nerd. We not only want you to check out the money series, but we also want you to press check out when you find a selection that you like.
Because those dollar bills are going directly to a Black person in the United States. And that's reparations, baby. Send your money if you're a white person.
That's so yeah, we not only want you to check out, but we want you to press check out.
Exactly.
There's and for those that and that's an example of a homonym. Well, actually, I'm sorry. That's actually incorrect. It's called polysemics, when you have one word with multiple meanings.
Nice.
Yes, and if you want to learn more about language and all fun stuff, linguistics, go ahead and listen to the language episode of the Joe and Kat Chat.
We did an episode on it.
Oh, the greatest podcast in the history of podcasts.
Totally.
Go check that language episode. You can learn a lot from that one. Just like every other episode that we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's many of them, 54 now. So I just want to shift focus a little bit because we are running short on time, as we always do. And I want to talk a little bit about drag, because I feel like that's a big part of, visibility, and the LGBTQ community is in a lot of members are people. Part of the community are, part of the drag community as well. And I know, Jamie, you are also a part of the drag community. So do you want to maybe just let us know how you got into drag? What made you decide to get into it?
Yeah, the first time that I ever saw anything to do with drag, I think I was 10 or 11 years old, and I watched The Birdcage with Robin Williams and Nathan.
I recently saw that for the first time this year, so it was a great movie.
okay, we'll talk about that later. But so that was the first time I ever saw anything to do with drag ever. And I was transfixed. 10, 11 years old, I really should have known a lot earlier that I wasn't an ally, that I was actually just gay. But hey, here we are. And then,
Same.
yeah. And then RuPaul's Drag Race came out. I didn't watch it for quite a few seasons. I think the first season I watched was season 7 or 8. And I just got obsessed again. But I was like, this is not a space for me. At the time, I was identifying as a cis straight woman still. Not to say that cis straight women cannot do drag. If you want to do drag, go out and go do drag. But at the time, I did not think that it was a space for me. I was also still living in Calgary. It wasn't until I moved to Toronto. I actually performed in drag the first time before I came out. I came out to Kat and my close friend Zach the night that I performed for the first time. Drunkenly on a corner crying. But, you know.
It happens.
Yeah, it does. So it was really my chosen family here in Toronto that told me that it's okay to do drag. This is a space for you. And then you, me, and my ex went out to brunch and we saw Tash Riot perform. And I was instantly obsessed, and I went up and talked to her during that brunch, actually. It was Erin Brockovich's brunch. Go check both of them out on Instagram. They're lovely. And then Tash actually went and met up with me and had a coffee and like talked me through some of my hangups on doing drag, what I was nervous about, helped me pick a song to perform the first time. And it really helped. And then from that point on, I was hooked. And now, at the time, I identified as a drag queen. I would say now I'm more of a drag performer or a gender performer because I do both queen drag and king drag, depending, that fluidity that I have. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. And I think that we need to really talk, if we're going to talk about drag, we need to talk about drag kings. We need to talk about trans people, and we need to specifically talk about BIPOC trans people.
Yeah.
Because they are, they're the ones that got us where we are, first and foremost. They are the ones that threw the first brick at Stonewall. They started that riot, and they got us to where we are today. And they are the ones that are continually pushing us forward. We owe everything, every single thing that we have as white queer people, we owe to nope. Oh, major slip of the tongue there. We owe to Black trans women and other trans women of color. That's who we owe this to.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I did, in true form for Joe and Cat Chats, I did write a whole history. I don't think we're going to have time to get through it. But yeah, at the turn of the century, one of the points that I did make a point of writing down was like gender performance was not only men dressing as women, because that's what the idea for most people of drag is, because of Drag Race, of course, which is what sort of thrust drag into the mainstream. But at the turn of the century, women were performing as male impersonators, drag kings, all sorts of things. And this is a term that has been around since like the late 1800s. With many iterations. But yeah, the other thing, I mentioned RuPaul's Drag Race, and so did you. That is what sort of brought drag to the mainstream. But the other thing that brought it was the 1990 documentary Paris is Burning, which I encourage everyone to.
That's going to mention it.
I encourage everybody to watch it. It's great. Yep. It showed the New York City drag houses that were places of refuge and the ballroom scene, exactly, there, and how they were places of refuge and belonging for the LGBTQ plus youth at the time. And it really transformed how drag performances were happening using dances like voguing, which many people have heard about because of Madonna, who stole it.
Yep, 100% stole it.
And something else that we also saw in that movie, the documentary Paris is Burning, and I've actually watched it a couple of times, and it's fascinating hearing some of the discussions from some of the stars in the movie. And unfortunately, all of the stars in the movie have passed away, and in some cases from tragic complications. Many of them from AIDS-related complications. I know one of them had diabetes and eventually had both feet amputated. Another was found strangled to death in their bedroom. So they all passed away under tragic circumstances. But when you watch the documentary, you see that these performers are human beings. They're human beings. And they're people. And obviously, not to go too deep into it, but yes, Madonna was a culture vulture for taking voguing from ballroom culture and then making it quote unquote mainstream. But there's a term that was used in that movie, and it was defined in that movie, called throwing shade. And throwing shade was used as a form of insulting somebody in ballroom culture. But now the phrase throwing shade is part of the lexicon that's outside of the LGBTQ community. So people will have cisgendered men and or women saying, "Yeah, I just threw shade at this person." And it's like, oh, okay, well, whoa, how did you? If you didn't watch that documentary, you wouldn't know that the term "throwing shade" came from "Paris is Burning."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing. Everything that we have in the queer community comes from the ballroom scene. Everything. Drag comes from ballroom. The terminology that we use, that comes from ballroom. The dance moves, that comes from ballroom. And a lot of it has been bastardized by RuPaul's Drag Race. Okay, it is called a dip. It is not called a death drop. And that, anyways, okay, I could rant about that for a minute. There's a whole bunch of things that I have issue with about RuPaul's Drag Race. I do enjoy the show. I enjoy watching the talent of the queens that are on the show. And after many years of scrutiny, RuPaul has finally had a trans man drag queen on the show, which was incredible. Love got Mick. That's not to say that there aren't still major issues, both with the show and the host. But I want to just touch a little bit on the mainstreaming of BIPOC queer culture, because now it's great because it brings it to the forefront. It becomes, more understood and widely recognized. But on the flip side, now it's becoming co-opted by white queer people and white cis people. So there's a new competition show called Legendary on HBO Max. It is beautiful. There's 2 seasons out now. And it is all about the ballroom scene. They basically have a ballroom competition once a week with all of the different houses, and it's great. They have Laomi, who is a ballroom voguing icon. She's incredible. Meg the Stallion, she's a judge. Law Roach is a judge, and Jamila Jamil is a host judge. Oh my god. And then just Deshaun Wellesley, I believe, is the host of it and the MC. And every single week there's a different theme, and either they have to give face, or it's body is the category, or if no one knows what any of these terms are, I highly recommend you go look up the different categories of ballroom, because it's where we get everything. Even in modeling shoots, if you watched America's Next Top Model, however many years ago that was, they say, "Give me face." That comes from ballroom. That's a ballroom thing. So we owe every single thing that we have, both as white queer people and the cisgendered straight community, particularly cis white straight girls, owes that to Black ballroom. Yeah. Anyways, I wanted to touch on that because I do think that it's a two-sided coin. where it's great that there's more visibility and acceptance, but then 15 years from now, people are going to be voguing down the street and it's going to be ignored where it came from.
Yeah, and the struggle and the violence will be, to use a word you used with me last week, Joe, sanitized from you know, the knowledge base and the history. It gets sanitized, and it, you know, you can liken it back to what we started the show with, which was rainbow washing. It's similar, and we have to just emphasize whenever we talk about these things that, you know, BIPOC, trans women particularly are creators of culture and creators of, you know, all things good in social movements. Like, I'm gonna say it. I just want to acknowledge, like, AAVE is part of, you know, all of this, you know, language at adoption of the you know, mainstream culture. And I want to just mention Marsha P. Johnson, and Sylvia Riviera, as well as Stormy Della Veri, I think is her name.
I don't know how
Those
to
were the
pronounce it.
three, yeah. My apologies if I said it wrong, but those were the three sort of, you know, women of color at the Stonewall riots that we really just need to, you know, pay homage to when we're talking about Pride and the history and all of this. So I guess we're almost out of time, and I feel like we have so much more to talk about, so much more I wanted to get to, but I just wanted to ask if you had any last words about, you know, just what we've been talking about today, and you know, any reflections on identity and expression. Oh,
Is that me cutting out or is it you cutting out? I can't really tell.
I think it's you, but I don't know.
Okay.
It's okay.
Hopefully it's not me. I did get a little bit of what you said about reflections on identity. So yeah, I mean, we could reflect for, I don't know, the rest of my life on identity and what it means and how we
Of
come to it.
course.
And it's always, it's so fluid. And I just, I'm going to say something that was said to me by every person in my chosen family and that I'm still working on accepting. But your identity can be what you think it is now, and it can change. And your identity now and your identity or identities in the future are all equally valid.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because it is really hard when you're exploring identity, gender, sexuality, anything that you can explore. It's difficult. And I do want to just send my love to all the youth out there. I mean, it's really tough to be in the queer community as a youth. And so reach out if you need anything.
Mm-hmm.
And just before we go, Joe, do you have any last comments?
Oh, you're muted.
No.
Well, I'm not muted anymore. First of all, Jamie, thank you. This was absolutely outstanding. I knew it was going to be informative and educational and enlightening, but this was even more than I expected, because, and Kat and I, we talked about this about a week ago. There are some blind spots in my knowledge base, and I really don't know much about the Pride movement. So I had to do a little extra homework and do a lot more watching and a lot more listening. And I enjoy being a backseat person and just sitting back and listening and observing to people that know more about a particular subject than I do. And certainly this is one of those instances. And I feel a lot better about my understanding of the Pride movement and identity and expression now than I did an hour ago. So thank you.
Good. I'm glad. I'll just wait one last thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Kat, you threw something out to the youth in the community that are still figuring themselves out or have figured themselves out. And if you haven't found your people, you will find your people. It might take you
Mhm.
29 years like it did me, but you will find your people.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you so much. Those are incredible last words, and thank you for being a part of this show today. I really appreciate it. As always, thank you, Joe, and thank you to everyone who tuned in or is going to listen to this. We do these because we care about each and every one of you. So take care of yourself and those around you. So, oh my goodness, I'm just so happy that we got to do this today.
Absolutely.
You take
All
care
right.
of yourselves.
Peace.
Awesome. Bye.